Hi, you're listening to After Dinner Conversations, short stories for long discussions. What that means is we get short stories, we select those short stories, and then we discuss them specifically about the ethics and the morality of the choices the characters and the situations put us in. Why did you do this? What makes you do this? What makes us good people? What's the nature of truth, goodness, all of that sort of stuff. And hopefully we're all better, smarter people for it and learn a little bit about why we think the way we think. So thank you for listening. Hi, and welcome back once again to After Dinner Conversation, short stories for long discussions. This week, the ladies have the week off for, I guess, vacation. Well, I don't know what we'd call it. So Sarah and Ashley are not here, but it is Jeremy and myself today. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey,
So we've never done it with just two people before, and we've never done it with just you and I. So I don't know what's going to happen here, but it'll be
we'll
interesting.
see. Yeah.
We will see. It might just be us like being like, yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, no, I agree with you too. I agree with you. And then we got nothing to talk about. Um, at any rate, like and subscribe. Check out Patreon. Check out the magazine. Season 4 just came out as a paperback, so you can get like a thick book of 25 short stories for not much, like $14 or something on Amazon. Just search After Dinner Conversation. Okay, so our story for today is Prey by Doc Varga. This is a little bit, it's a long story, but it doesn't have a lot of twists and turns, so it's not complicated to explain. A woman, this is like a near future sort of situation where a woman works in a suicide office run by the government. And there's basically a rule that you can get government assisted suicide where the government will be the ones to do the killing of you, and it's a legal suicide as opposed to doing it yourself, which would be an illegal suicide, is the impression I got from the story. But in order to get the government approved legal suicide, you have to do 15 hours of mandatory counseling, which actually seems pretty reasonable. And so you meet with a counselor for the 15 hours. You don't have to like spill your guts. You don't have to do anything. You just have to engage in conversation for 15 hours. At the end of that, the person doesn't sign off on you dying. Like once you've completed the 15 hours, whether they agree or disagree with you killing yourself, you're cool. You then go to the government facility. The government facility euthanasias you. I don't know if that's the plural of
No,
it.
it's attached to a research project. You
That's right.
can select which
Which
human
research project?
research right that
Now,
you
one
want
of
to
the
work
things
with,
I
whether
don't
genetic
remember from
testing or yeah.
yeah, one of the things I don't remember from the story is do you have to do the research or can you just have them kill you without the research aspects of your death?
They may not I don't remember them talking about that, but it
Okay,
seemed like everybody wanted to do it for the benefit of humanity, so it was
right.
some sort of
So it's like some sort of they're running like some sort of like Mengele tests or something, whatever that German guy was, to find out things that you couldn't ethically find out uh, with a person unless they were planning to die. Right, and so he signs up for it and he does the 15 hours. And there's a couple of twists and turns in it. One, he's really cagey about why he's killing himself, and he doesn't want to tell the lady. He talks about being prey. He, the lady really can't get the therapist really can't get much out of him except that he feels like he's prey. She finds a story of his online that won a writing contest, which I thought was a really cool like story within a story, which was
yeah, I like that
basically
too.
yeah, which
Yeah.
was basically like a cave that in the world, and animals would come by, and the cave basically would talk to the animals, and he would convince them that like basic the way I interpreted it, maybe you've got a different one. First, he talks to the rabbit and says like, "Hey, rabbit, how come you're not as strong as the bear? How come you can't fly like the bird?" And the rabbit's like, "Well, I'm fast." And he goes, "Yeah, but you're not everything, are you? If you come in this cave, you will be." And so the rabbit goes in and he never leaves. And one by one, all of the animals of the forest go into the cave because of pride, I guess you could say, or envy of the other animals. Not pride, envy. That they're not as cool, that they're not as cool as they're missing something that some other animal has. And they can,
Right. It's like the cave is preying on their self-doubt.
right. Because once you're in the cave, you're consumed by the cave, but then according to the cave, you're limitless. And so the very last animal is the coyote, I think.
The wolf.
the wolf, thank you, who says, I know what you're doing. I know that you're consuming us, but we're eternal and you're temporary. And the wolf voluntarily, knowing that he's going to die, goes in to join his friends. And that's the end of the story. It's a little bit opaque in my mind, some aspects of the story, but that's the story.
But very
Uh,
allegorical.
Very
You know, it's
allegorical story. Yeah. And then, so the woman asks him about it, and he's like, I can't tell you about it because if I tell you, then then you're equally going to want to kill yourself, and I don't want to do that to you. The lady then fills out this special form that's basically a trick when you can't convince someone to back out of the program because she was trying to save, quote unquote,
yeah, and
save her
that's
200th person.
right, and that's basically her role isn't to counsel them towards suicide, but is to
That's
counsel
right.
them away from it.
Right. And doesn't she have like a bonus if she gets to 200 people a year or something that she counsels
Something
away from
like that.
suicide?
Yes,
Yeah. And so I'm going really fast because I feel like, I mean, you should read the story. That would be
there's a
the
lot to
easiest
it.
way to
Yeah,
do it. Yeah. The easiest way to do it would be just to read the freaking story. It's in the, what is it, May Magazine or
May.
something? Yeah, May
Yeah,
Magazine. Uh, and so she has this trick that she does that usually works with people that look like they really are going to kill themselves, where you basically say, okay, I've got rush approval. Let's go die right now. And so he's like, cool, I'm in. She walks him to another building, puts him in like a chamber. In my mind, it looked like the chamber from the movie The Fly with
yeah.
with what's his name, Chris, with whatever that guy is, it's super tall,
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum, yeah. And then they pull a switch, and he thinks this is the moment where I die. But he doesn't. It's a fake chamber, but it's a way to test if you really,
Their
you know,
resolve.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like all those people you hear about that jump off of the Golden Gate Bridge that, like, the moment they jumped, they knew they'd made a mistake. And so this is a way to know you made a mistake and still live through it. Except he's not upset. Like, I mean, he's upset he got tricked, but he hasn't
he
changed his
didn't change
mind.
his mind. Right.
Right. So he comes back the next day and he's so pissed at her for tricking him that he basically says, like, let me tell you what's really going on. And this is where the story gets even more odd, but in a good way, is that how do you explain it? That basically the earth is feeding off of you, and that the
Right.
way it
The
feeds off of you is by chemically tricking you into caring about others and wanting to be alive. And that by keeping you alive through these chemical tricks that it's created for your bag of flesh that holds your soul, it feeds off of you. And the reason he wants to die is because he doesn't want to keep feeding the earth, which is like this predator, right? Basically, we're being farmed by the earth. And the way it keeps us in the farm process, if I'm screwing this up, by the way, help me out. The way that keeps us in the farm process is by creating these tools in our bag of flesh that make us have friends, that make us have connections to people, that make us feel compelled to live, so that we're basically not corn that commits suicide.
right, and he framed it in the we do all of this because we're afraid to die, and we're afraid to die because of all of these tricks, because of all of
Right,
these hormones and chemicals in our brain, and
right,
and we're really just here to feed the earth.
right. And it's our soul that's eternal, and we're just trapped in this bag of flesh to feed the earth. Right. And so he dies after being run through the experiments. Unfortunately, not long enough to actually get any good data out of the experiment because it was so painful. Uh, and I also thought it was interesting. I didn't realize this till I just reread it before we did this thing, that the stop word is rabbit, which
Yeah,
is the same first animal that goes into the cave. Um, and then she gets her bonus anyway because she's such an awesome person, even though she didn't meet her quota. Goes home, and the end of the story is she now sees what he sees. Like, you see the beginnings of her doubt in her social connections with her family and her kids and her husband, and that seed of, I don't even know what I'd call it, like existential nihilism. I don't know
yeah,
what you'd call it.
that probably a good term.
She now has that same seed and might eventually be in the same place where he is, unless she can figure out some way to deal. Okay, so one thing I want to mention about this story, and then I'll shut up because I want to hear what you think, Jeremy. Is it's a longer story. I think I actually credited it as two stories in our magazine because it's like 7 or 8 thousand words. But it's a full character arc. It's a full development. It's not like a one trick, like, hey, I've got a question. Like, what if you could
Right.
fly, but one random person in the world had to die? Like, it's not that kind of like oneer. It's like a full world that we exist and live in, where the characters are all fleshed out. But there's this really interesting question in my mind, or a couple actually. Okay, so now I'm like 5 minutes into my explanation. I'm dying to hear what you thought of this, dude, because this is a really interesting story.
No, it is a really interesting story, and there's a lot to sort through. Um, there's some really interesting questions about not just belief systems and kind of how we develop our beliefs and what they make us do.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you mean religious beliefs or just sort of core beliefs?
core beliefs, really
Okay,
closely held beliefs. And if you look at from
sure,
like a psychology perspective, really tightly held political beliefs, it
sure,
doesn't have to be about religion. It's
sure.
anything that defines us,
Could be Manchester
and
United.
exactly.
Yeah,
Um, kind of how these are held and how hard they are to change. So,
yeah,
when you have a core belief, basically,
yeah,
um, in a, a politicized, in our politicized world at the moment with social media, it's really hard to affect people's closely
yeah,
held beliefs.
yeah,
So there's a lot of, I think that's what this is talking about as well. Because whether anybody else believes them or whether there's any factual evidence for it, this guy, Derek, clearly believed this.
yes. And he's a
You
true
know,
believer. It is not a transient belief. Like he
right,
literally thought he was about to die when they pulled the switch. And then the next day he's like, yeah, no, I'm in. Let's do it a second time.
right. Because, this will solve this problem that I have because I don't want to be prey. No,
Right.
so it was really interesting from that perspective. And, oh, and, even your questions about, is suicide right or wrong? Whether you have legitimate or illegitimate reasons for it. That's, it's a really interesting question, especially around, because he's doing it for this closely held belief that everybody else sees as wrong.
Right.
So is
And,
that
and I think that's I mean, there's lots of really deep things to talk about. And that's one of them is one of my friends talked about, and she stole the idea from some psychology, this idea of, I forget what it's called, like teapot God. That 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 it's possible there's a God, but it's equally possible that there's a tiny teapot floating on the opposite side of the sun that controls us as a deity. We just can't see it because it's a teapot on the opposite side of the sun of the earth. And it's absurd, but so is God, right? Like both are equally possible of being true. Both are equally unprovable. Um, and I think that's one of the things that I thought this deeply held core belief idea is we designate certain core beliefs as acceptable and unacceptable, even related to suicide, right? Like
yeah,
if you are in pain, if you have cancer, if you're very old, and different cultures, of course, have different rules about when it's okay to die. Um, and we've sort of collectively decided the okay from the not okay reasons, right? We have
right,
these sort of societal core belief that's not entirely shared, but it's 80% shared, right? And this guy has the equivalent of the floating teapot on the opposite side of the earth belief. Depending on how you view his view, maybe
right,
you see it as valid, but to most people it would be pretty absurd. Um, but does that make it less valid than my reasons for thinking it's okay when to die, right?
exactly.
Yeah. And that's a
So
hard one.
yeah, it is a hard one, and you could even and if as an exercise, you could frame his argument slightly differently and maybe make it a little more okay, or make it a little less absurd. Um,
Sure. I think you could go both ways. I think you could make it like according to my belief system, if I eat meat, I have to commit suicide to
right.
balance the universe of the death of an animal. And it's like you're a freaking idiot. But but that, but that's no more of an idiot than anything else I believe, right?
Yeah.
Like you
Well,
believe. Okay,
yeah,
what am I going to
exactly.
do?
So
Tell you you're wrong? Like
Right. So the idea that the Earth is consuming your energy,
Yeah.
it's really not that far. That part of it's weird, but the other part that it's using all of these hormones, all of your brain chemicals to make your brain think something,
Yeah.
to make you happy and make you enjoy this life.
Yeah.
It's an equally similar idea that, we're just um, a complex organism to help our DNA reproduce itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
No,
know,
that
that,
we're a delivery system.
yeah,
We're a sophisticated delivery system for propagating.
our DNA specifically,
Yeah.
not even humans, just, our DNA wants to reproduce. So it's made all of these things to help itself do that. And we're just a byproduct of that.
Yeah.
You know,
I
it's
know
an,
I know we've
a more
had this.
scientific version of the same
Yeah.
argument.
So I'm sure we've had this discussion before, if not in a podcast. I know you and I've had it before in general. That I had roommates that were grad students, PhD students, and one of the things one of them studied was this idea of evolutionary psychology.
Yeah,
That the reason that we believe in God is not because God does or doesn't exist, but because the people who believed in God were more evolutionary successful, right?
yes,
And the reason that every culture thinks you shouldn't hook up with your siblings is because the ones who didn't think that, they died off, right? So it's not like we inherently knew that. It's just that that genetic trait carried down, and we were the more successful offspring.
right.
Um, and so in that sense, I feel like, just my own personal opinion, is I feel like he's a little bit right in that we are evolved. Like the ones who wanted the most to live are the ones who lived. And so we are evolved to,
To want to continue and
yeah,
reproduce.
right.
The agent of the Matrix was right. We're just a
Yeah.
virus.
We're just a virus. Yeah. That our job is to exist and to want to exist and to want to make more of ourselves.
Yeah.
We've now fulfilled our duty. Yeah. All right. So let me ask you a question. I'm like, I don't know if you do this, but when we come into these, I'm like, oh my God, I really want to know what other people think about this one particular thing or these two
Yeah,
points.
definitely.
So one of the ones that I really was like, oh my God, I can't wait to freaking hear what you think about this. I think this is a dangerous story because I think given the right reader and the right mental framework, I think it actually has the effect of propagating this belief system, the potential opportunity to propagate this belief.
Hmm.
So
No,
let me ask you this. So
right.
15 or 16-year-old goth you or whoever, like, would you say, like, you shouldn't read this? Like, this is not a healthy story that you shouldn't be allowed to read this until you've gotten to a point where you're no longer susceptible to it.
Yes, I might agree with that. Um, okay, look at it in a different way. So, as a short story, I don't think it's as dangerous as it would be as uh, a series of religious pamphlets that say the same thing. It depends on how you're presenting it.
Okay.
So you could take this idea and expand it into a bunch of allegorical stories and hand it out on the corner and have an impact on people.
Okay.
But I think the short story as it's on its own doesn't necessarily have the same impact.
Yeah.
I think that would be my stance
Okay.
on that.
So, because like you and I have talked, like I think Clockwork Orange, great book, great movie. I think Fight Club, great book, great enough book, great movie. Like, and they're dangerous ideas,
They're
but I don't
dangerous
think,
ideas.
but I don't that they're not dangerous ideas that I'm afraid of. This story actually was a dangerous idea that I'm afraid of,
Okay.
if that makes
Now I can,
sense.
yeah, certainly.
Mm.
And
You
I
didn't
think
have
there
that same
probably
experience?
I didn't have that same experience. And
Okay.
there probably are people who think Fight Club is a dangerous idea that they're afraid of.
Like afraid of it
Because
spreading as an idea.
absolutely.
Yeah.
In a serious way. And
Right.
not just as a pop culture uh a pop culture meme.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I read it and like when I've read it, my first thought was, man, he's right. Like not about the earth feeding off of us part, but
Right.
about the like Like, I care because I'm programmed to care.
Yeah,
Like, I
absolutely.
have friends because I'm programmed to have friends. Like, I, feel this need to save myself from death because I'm programmed to feel the need to save myself from death. Like, I'm not any of the things that I think I am. I'm just the programming that like won the evolutionary fight. And that to me, and once I realized that, my first thought was, well, like, screw it. Like, I'm going to beat my programming, right? And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. No, that means I have to go watch The Crow and like read Ayn Rand and like be a nihilist. And like, there's a whole series of like life choices I'm not prepared to make and don't have the clothing for. Uh, I don't
Well,
know.
right.
Maybe it didn't affect you as much as it affected me.
Not in the same way. No, but
Would you let your
I
daughter read it?
yeah, I don't. Again, I don't think it's that impactful in that way.
Okay.
It is.
Oh, man.
Uh, yeah, it's
Okay.
an interesting idea.
All right.
I think it could be dangerous presented the right
All
way.
right. Yeah. I
I'll
don't know.
agree with you on that.
Were there things about it that really stuck out for you more? Sorry, that was the one I was really dying to get off my chest.
Okay. No, not in the same way.
Okay.
I I thought it was much more interesting, really, around the psychology of deeply held beliefs,
Okay.
how those
Yeah.
are formed,
True.
how those impact us. Is kind of the path I went down on this.
Okay. Did you think about
Um,
how those deeply held beliefs spread as well? I mean, there's certainly a
oh
viral
yeah,
pattern to those how
there.
they spread as well, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like I read a book
absolutely.
years ago about the idea that I think it was the same guy who did Snow Crash. Uh, the
Stevenson.
the idea that that ideas spread this in the exact same way that the biology of viruses spread from host to host to host, and that you're really spreading and programming ideas and populating ideas the same way viruses spread, and that you can inoculate for them in the same way you inoculate for viruses. And
Yeah,
Christianity is like the most
right.
successful virus, right? Or religion is
Yeah,
the most
and that's a little
successful
what
virus.
Snow Crash was about as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So, um, that viruses spread through language, or brain
Yeah.
programming can be spread through language.
Yeah.
Um, no, and I think you're right on that. Information and ideas are or can be dangerous, and do
Communism,
spread.
right? A
Yeah,
few kernels of this idea spread to the world, right? Whether some weren't susceptible and some were, but you'd be hard pressed to argue that communism is one of the main viruses, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, just in a spreading way, of the 20th century, right? It went from non-existent to a third or half of the globe's population.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and religions in general as
Yeah,
well,
sure.
definitely spread in the same way.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What do you think about valid and invalid reason for suicide? Do you think there are valid and invalid reasons? Or do you think
Yeah, and
any core belief is a valid reason definitionally?
well, and I think you could look at it a couple of different ways, and they do that. The author does that in the story, where the counselor talks about previous patients who were end of life anyways.
Hi, this is Colby, and you are listening to After Dinner Conversation, short stories for long discussions. But you already knew that, didn't you? If you'd like to support what we do at After Dinner Conversation, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/After Dinner Conversation. That's right, for as little as $5 a month, you can support thoughtful conversations like the one you're listening to. And as an ad incentive for being a Patreon supporter, you'll get early access to new short stories and ad-free podcasts, meaning you'll never have to listen to this blurb again. At higher levels of support, you'll be able to vote on which short stories become podcast discussions, and you'll even be able to submit questions for us to discuss during these podcasts. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being the kind of person that supports thoughtful discussion.
Well, and I think you could look at it a couple of different ways, and they do that. The author does that in the story, where the counselor talks about previous patients who were end of life anyways,
Right.
who were, terminal diseases and
Right.
didn't
And she
want to go
seems
through the
okay with that, right? Because it matches
right,
her sort of core belief system a little bit, or at least societal's.
right, and in those cases, those cases didn't count against her the same way that young people coming in, and she talks about a previous case of somebody also very young
Right. Jared, I
who
think
was
it was, or something.
right, and I'd have to reread it to really
Yeah.
go through that part again. But yes, where uh, not so medical reasons are a valid reason.
Sure.
In
In
our
this
society,
world. Sure. And in
yeah,
our society. Yeah. And so do you agree
where
with that? I
yeah,
assume medical reasons are valid reasons.
yes,
Okay. So are there other reasons that could an absurd reason that is sincerely held core belief, in your opinion, be a valid reason?
it's a valid reason for that person. It's a valid reason for Derek.
Would you talk him
Um,
out of it?
well, yeah, I would certainly try to talk him out of it because I don't see it as a valid reason. Um,
Okay, I'm going to call bullshit on this though. Wait a minute though.
but I'm saying
But
it's a
isn't
valid for
isn't
them.
but isn't part of the diversity, valuing diversity, valuing that other people's core values, even if you strongly disagree with them or even the basic premise of them, have inherent value. Now, I'm not talking about ones that hurt other people. Not
Right.
like it's my core belief that
Okay.
I should be able to like kick babies, right? But it's my core belief that I should be able to sit in my house by myself and smoke pot. It's my core belief that I should be able to end my own life in a way that doesn't hurt or affect other people directly. Obviously, there are people that are going to miss you, right? And that's why I
Right.
think the suicide part of this core belief in this story is so interesting for the reason you're talking about, right? It is a sincerely held core belief that harms no one but yourself.
Right. But I think there are a lot of layers to it because
Okay,
as a society, core beliefs that, make you no longer part of society are detrimental to society in a long-term sense if that idea spreads.
yeah. Which,
So,
interesting enough, he was originally trying not to let it spread because he understood the effect it might have on her.
right. Which actually kind of goes against his idea if we are
Yeah,
all prey of the earth, this is an idea he should spread to
right,
try to prevent that.
right. Yeah. So would you try and talk him out of it in the story?
Yes, I would try to talk him out of that. And,
Mm.
but again, that goes back to it's not a evidence-based belief, you know?
Sure, but the need to be alive isn't an evidence-based belief either. I mean, there's
Yeah,
no evidence that being alive is like the
is
money, right? Yeah.
beneficial to the world.
Right,
Okay.
except that your brain releases chemicals telling you that it is so. I'm not trying to convince you to kill yourself.
No, no, I know.
I'm just trying to like poke holes here.
Right, but it feels like the right thing to do. And maybe that is just the chemical in my brain talking, you
Yeah.
know, um, to talk them out of it because it doesn't seem like a relevant
Hmm.
reason for them for Derek to go through with that. So I think she's right to
But is it but
try to talk him out of
but
that.
let me ask you this. Is it possible that he could have a relevant reason, but isn't your definition of relevance simply corresponds with my opinions? Like, it's not like he could hold a relevant reason that you disagree with, because that's your definition of relevance is you agree
Yeah.
with him. So what you're really saying is like you can kill yourself for the reasons I deem you're allowed to kill yourself. That's and I'm not trying to pick on you.
No,
It's
no,
just I think
I
it's a
get, but
complicated issue.
it is a complicated issue.
I don't know. I
So
think it's
I would
because
still try to talk him out of it.
yeah, no, that's fair. And maybe someday he would thank you for it. Like maybe he'd be like, "Man, that was
I
worse
was
in my
wrong.
that was worse in my Ayn Rand phase." Like so glad I did so glad I left that phase. Right, I could have made a huge mistake. And I think
Yeah.
that's one I mean if I'm playing the other side of it, one of the arguments again that you would argue against him doing this, I feel like, is it's not a there's no control Z, there's no do-overs, right? And so like if you want to tell me I have a sincerely held belief that I should dot dot dot, if it's anything that can be undone, then I'd be like, look, I could be wrong. You could be right. I think you're wrong, but good luck with that.
Right. The
Suicide's
idea
not
of
one of those options.
type 1 and type 2 decisions,
Right. Yeah. This is a
life and
type 1
death.
decision, right?
Yeah. Where, right, there's no way to return from this decision.
Right. And so maybe that's the reason you're saying you would try and talk him out of it.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know, man. I just don't,
I think
I don't have as strong of a hold on life living as I think you do. Like if somebody came to me and was just like, nah, I'm good, I'd be like, fair. Like, fair point, man. Like I choose to live. It seems to be the better bargain to me, but I totally get how somebody could come to a different conclusion. Uh, and maybe that's just a matter of just, our life experiences. But
right.
yeah, I don't know. The one
I
part
like
that,
to think you would try to talk me out of it.
oh, wait a minute. So now I need to ask you, if this ever does come, should I? Because I wasn't going to. I was just gonna, I was gonna be like, well, give it a week. Like, like, wait longer for this decision than you would on getting a tattoo, at least, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I like if somebody came to me and said, like, here's why I want to kill myself, I'd be like, this is no do-overs. We got to talk about this. And I would
Yeah,
definitely,
exactly.
I mean, I would definitely want to talk about it a long time, right? But at the end of the day,
It's your decision.
it's your call. Like, who am I to
Yeah.
say? I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know. What did you think of the cave allegory of the pride thing or the envy thing? I
Yeah,
wasn't
that was
entirely sure how it matched up to his situation. Like the author meant it to, but I only like 80% saw the similarity.
well, I think the similarity was specifically, again, the cave was preying on their self-opinion or their self-view.
Right, the way the earth preys on us, right? That was my, or no.
No, that they could be, that, every creature has self-doubt.
Sure.
And so that's what the cave was preying on. And so if you want to be your best person, come into the cave.
Sure, but then
And
how
if
does that
you want to
relate to
be
the
with,
story, his situation in the story then?
just that the earth is preying on you. I think that's where the allegory is.
Okay. I assumed that maybe the cave
Well,
was like the earth, but I didn't really
and
see the one-to-one comparison,
and maybe around the idea that, we're a product of all of our, chemical processes in our brains.
including our
So,
envy and all that.
right. And so
Okay.
that's all, those are all methods the earth uses to keep us alive.
Yeah.
And so it's different in the cave allegory. The cave wants the animals to basically die and be part of the cave.
Right.
And that's how I read it is,
Yeah,
come into
agreed.
the cave, you're going to heaven. Here's the
Right.
promise of the afterlife
Right.
if you come into the cave.
Right. That's the way I read it too.
Where that doesn't seem to be what he thinks the earth is doing. The earth is
Yeah.
just trying to keep us alive, to feed on our energy.
Right. And it just keeps
So there is,
reincarnating us.
right.
Yeah.
So I think there are some differences, but it's,
Okay.
again, an allegory.
Do you think that in this case the person's susceptibility to the story was based on his sort of existential crisis? Like, because it talks early on in the story when she first starts interviewing him that he didn't seem to have a lot of friends. He was neither happy nor sad. He was kind of listless. Like that he didn't get excited about life. He didn't get depressed about life. He didn't, that he had friends, but they weren't close friends. It's almost like someone on the outside watching life or something like
Right.
that.
I felt like, okay, and the doctor in the story was trying
Yeah.
to look at those things as well. Like, was there a trauma? Was there abuse?
Right.
Um, I don't know. I'm not
All
sure
right.
it really went into
Okay.
that idea much.
All right. Fair enough. I wondered if, I mean, I think it's interesting in the story to talk about, like, why did he, going back to what you said, why did he adopt this as a core belief, right? There must have been something about him that made this make sense,
Mm-hmm.
where to other 99 out of 100 people, they'd be like, oh, that's just stupid.
Right.
Um,
Um, I don't know if the story got into that either. Really talked
yeah.
about it. Didn't really talk about where he came across this idea
Uh,
much.
it was that dude, the paladin idea, the guy who was a
Oh, right,
paladin
in the
that was
game,
like a high level paladin in an
in
MMO,
some game, yeah.
sent him a bunch of
Okay.
YouTube videos. You know, I mean, yeah. Uh, but I understand why you wouldn't remember that because it's just like, yeah,
It's
the idea
brief.
was the
Yeah.
important thing, not necessarily where it came from.
Right.
Um, hmm, okay. What about the trick that she pulls on him? I thought that was actually kind of unethical. I mean, I understand why she did it, and I understand why it's effective.
Right. How do you validate? How do you validate that the decision is uh, correctly placed? That they're making the
Yeah,
right decision. Other if you can't get there through just counseling or
sure.
discussions. Um, yeah, it's questionably ethical.
Questionable in
Or
your
the
mind.
ethics, right? Because again, if her
Do you think there are unethical ways to keep someone from committing suicide? I mean, that's the core question, right?
locking them up, yeah,
Is anything that keeps someone from killing themselves like fair?
is all of that ethical?
Right?
No,
Is
I don't
all
think
of it
so.
ethical? Assuming the person's not sick or has some sort of
Right.
societally deemed valid reason for killing themselves, like, can you just lie and be like, "Look, the tooth fairy'd be terribly disappointed in you." Like every time someone commits suicide, a puppy is tortured. Like,
Right.
I mean, I think an argument could be made. I don't know if I agree with it that anything that keeps someone from taking their life is a fair statement to make to try and sway them.
Is locking them up.
Sure, for the right, and that we do that, right? Like the only thing you can't tell your therapist is that you plan to do like immediate harm to yourself.
Hmm.
Right? Don't tell your therapist that because they can immediately institutionalize you without your permission. Yeah. So, opinion or no? You're thinking. That's your thinking face.
Yeah, that's my thinking face. No, I don't. And there are probably shades of that in that decision. How long do you lock somebody up? How long do
Sure.
you
Protect
um,
them from themselves.
protect them from themselves? At
Yeah.
what point are you no longer, even looking at it, we're locking them up because people killing themselves would be bad for society.
Sure.
So, but at what point are they no longer contributing to society if
Yeah.
you're just locking people up and
Right.
not helping them?
Right. We're going to put you in jail for
If you're
20 years because we don't want people to not exist. Except you're going to essentially not exist.
That doesn't seem
Yeah.
terribly ethical.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe if we're helping them while they're locked up,
Yeah.
but that doesn't seem to be what we're doing in our society either.
No.
So,
And some people probably, aren't as susceptible or able to be helped, right? Depending on the situation
mhm.
you're in. Hmm.
So yes, I think there are some things that are not ethical
Okay. So
in
you think
keeping
there are
people
things you
alive.
could, okay. Do you think there are any lies that could be unethical to keep someone alive? Like I think everyone either has said or knows someone who has said this. Don't worry, man, it gets better. And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I, I think it gets better. Like realistically, you know,
No,
uh,
I think telling people,
you don't have a high
yeah,
school degree. You're addicted to meth, and you're between homes, living out of a van down by the river. 50-50
yes.
like 50-50 it's going to get better, right? 50-50 you're going to get gangrene in that cut and it's just going to get worse.
Hmm.
But we tell that lie, right?
Yeah. No, I don't necessarily think that's unethical.
Okay.
That's trying to convince somebody there's a reason to not do this.
Yeah. Would you support this program, by the way? I thought about that when I was reading it too. Like if the
Y-
government, not that it would ever get through Congress, but if there was like a 15 hours of mandatory therapy, counseling, and then doctor assisted suicide is not illegal. Would
right.
you
In
support
some
that?
sort of research program.
Yeah.
I feel like it's set up the program in the story is set up very good in
Yeah.
the sense that it would seem not terribly an unethical process because there
Yeah.
is counseling. They have, and if they have such a good success rate at keeping people out of the program,
Sure.
they're actively trying, and that's the point of the program, is to keep people out of it
Yeah.
and not to just channel people into research. That would be
Right.
unethical.
Right. Like the point is to be successful in explaining to people why they have things to live for.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the way they presented in the story, it's a very good program that should be supported.
Yeah. I could see a program like this going on in a place like Japan or someplace where one, the society sort of views has a different balance on the scale between individualism and collectivism, but then also where there's a population issue, right? Where
Right.
it's like we accept that we have population density issues. Maybe Japan doesn't have it so much, but
More
conceivably some
like
China
China.
or something, yeah.
Yeah,
Where they
China,
go, you know
India.
what, we I don't know, I could see a country implementing a program similar to this.
Right.
Maybe not in our lifetimes, but like it seemed plausible.
No, I think it's plausible.
Yeah.
And again, the way they develop the program, all the walls are transparent
Yeah.
to promote transparency in the program.
Yeah.
Again, the program in the story is set up very well to eliminate all of the objections to it, even though there were
Right.
still protesters to the story, to the
Yeah.
program.
Which of course there would be. Like that just makes sense from a sort
Yeah.
of Judeo-Christian standpoint. Yeah. All right. Anything else you wanted to talk about? Or that sounds like to me like the main thing you were interested in was the
It's really the
core belief
psychology side of
system,
it.
the psychology
Yeah.
of core beliefs. What is it that made that so interesting to you? Not that I disagree. I mean, I agree that is a really interesting aspect to it.
Um,
But that he was so wrong in your opinion?
no, not that he.
Oh,
Yeah, that I suppose that's part of it. No, just the psychology of how we develop really strong core beliefs,
mm,
and so and how that affects us, and the idea that that would lead people to suicide. It's the similar things as Fight Club and
yeah,
A Clockwork Orange. Where we talk about that kind of psychology.
yeah.
I don't know.
One of
It's
the
just an
things
interest.
I am by no means an expert on, any of this, but I remember one of the things that I read, I think it was Aristotle, was this idea that the stories that control us should be governed by the state, and that in this sort of perfect model Greek society, the state would write all of the stories that are told, the equivalent of movies and books,
Right.
because they would want people to ingest and internalize the core values that the state found most beneficial, right? And so if you want people to value family, to not do drugs, to like, it's one thing to take out a just say no program. It's another thing to have sort of a strong, like top to bottom, like crib to grave, like value system that are your only options of thought, right? Um,
Right. Or that it's at least directed in a certain.
right. That like sort of like that the government runs Disney, right? And decides like, and I've thought about that. When I first read it, I heard it, I thought it was a really stupid idea. But as we've done more of these podcasts, I've thought more about how the sort of media we ingest influences and normalizes sort of core values, right? Like in my
Yeah,
case, I've talked
definitely.
before about Star Trek being a big influence on me, and science fiction, Star Wars, and all these things. Like I just as well could have gotten hooked on something else.
Right.
Um,
So
I
I feel like we go through this a lot in society, and this is why so many people object to so many types of programs and
yeah,
sex in film or violence
sure,
in media.
right.
So
You can behead someone, but you can't show a boobie.
Right.
Can't show a mother nursing, but you can object. You can behead someone and still get a PG-13 rating.
Exactly. And so,
Yeah,
no, there is value to the idea that maybe a government could control, but can control what is consumed or what is produced for consumption in terms of media. But I think we're way beyond that.
sure.
But I think that's what everybody is trying to do with controlling, what is in education programs, why we have so many
Oh,
charter
sure.
schools,
Yeah, and
because
why,
we
right,
want to control
right, and why school
what our
boards
kids are getting.
control
Yeah.
what's in textbooks. But I mean, the reason I mention that is because it sounds like, and I don't think this is what you're saying, but it sounds a hair like what you're saying is this guy's core belief is Crazy Town. And the reason it became Crazy Town is because he talked to this guy in an MMO who had a whole bunch of YouTube videos who exposed him to all these things and modified his core belief system, and that he's wrong, which would then lead the next logical step being, and so we should
Yes.
regulate or control the things that have the ability to adversely modify someone's core belief system. And I don't think that's your opinion because I know you're sort of a strong First Amendment guy. But if I followed the steps of what you're saying, that's where you would end up.
Right. And no, that's not what I'm saying is
Okay.
that we should do that, but it is, it's again, there are many layers to it. From that perspective of what we teach in schools being important
Mm-hmm.
and what we're exposing our kids to, yes, I think you're right that what they're exposed to affects who they are
Sure.
and those core belief systems. So,
But you don't think we should regulate what they're exposed to and what those that generate those core belief systems.
it's a yes and a no. I know we
Mr. Calling is
are.
a lawyer.
I know it's
Show me an economist
complicated.
with one hand. All right, that's a good place to end up.
Yeah,
We've talked a
but you
while
know what
about
I
this
mean.
story. Yeah, no, I do know that you're wishy-washy as hell is what I think. No, I understand. It's hard to say yes and like it's hard to see
Definitive
him
yes and no to some things like that because
right.
there are a lot of facets to it, and some things are more important than others in that conversation. And so,
Let me ask you a simple question then. If you were the YouTube company who found this guy's YouTube videos that he shared with this kid, and would you take them down? Because now it's not the government doing it. Now it's a private company doing it. Would you just be like, you know what? We don't need this. Go put this on your own private website. You're not going to put it on YouTube.
oof, it's a good question. Um, I based on how they're presented, probably not, because looking at those, it's such a bizarre belief that he's talking about. It's like flat earthers. Should we remove videos about the flat earth society? That's
Right?
not causing suicides. It's just propagating stupid information.
Yeah. That is
But
so obviously wrong, but has become
that
a
is
core
so
belief.
obviously wrong.
That has become a core
Yeah,
belief for people. That's exactly my point, right? And so
right.
this is why I'm sort of picking on you a little bit about it, because once you make the first leap that there are invalid core beliefs, the next leap is, and they shouldn't exist, right? Or you can go the other way and say there are invalid core beliefs for me, but it's a core belief. So who the heck am I to say? Like, if you want to believe that, that God somehow decided that the deli line was really the problem with immorality, don't eat pork. Fine. That sounds absolutely absurd that, like, the master of the universe could care about whether or not if you eat a pig. Uh, but whatever, man. You're not me. So what do I care? Whether or not if you eat pork doesn't affect me in the least. Believe in a flat earth, right? I don't know. I guess I'm just tilting at windmills now, but
Right. But, there is a problem if enough people start believing that, it starts affecting policy decisions.
yeah. That's like climate change.
So
That's
where do you
exact.
draw the line?
Where
Yeah.
do you draw the line, right? You have to, and I think this is the thing. So I know we said we were done, but it's like, and I think the thing you have to decide internally, and this does relate to the story, but it relates to the larger issue, is truth inherently more compelling than fiction? And if you believe that truth is inherently more compelling than fiction, then you're not worried about the flat earthers. And you're not worried about this kid because, like, all things being equal, like 15, 20% of the population might believe in a flat earth someday. Um, but the truth, but we lean towards truth, right? And if you believe
Right.
that, then you don't have to worry about the rest of it. I don't know. All
I
right.
think
Well,
that goes a long way, but yeah, eventually, again, enough people come into a position of power and start affecting policy decisions
right.
based on those beliefs.
Right.
You're no longer following
Yeah.
truth.
This is why I'm a big, like, this is why I'm all about, like, First Amendment and freedom of speech and not censoring stuff, because I do have that inherent belief that, like,
Truth will overcome.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're going to scrape 10 or 15% out of the people who believe anything you post that Greenland doesn't exist, but truth wins the majority. I don't have anything to base that on, right? Because when I read this story, I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me. Like, at some level, this makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, maybe I'd be the flat earther in this story, right?
Yeah.
All right, we'll call it quits there. That's While we don't have the girls here, we get way too deep, way too quick. All right, so thank you for listening. Like and subscribe. Support us on Patreon. Go to the afterdinnerconversation.com. I've been your co-host Colby here with Jeremy. That's your part
Yep.
where you talk.
Hi.
And yeah, right. And we're gonna do one more without the ladies, and then we'll have them. At least Sarah will be back in the next week. So I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed listening to this, please like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. You know, the vast majority of people listen haven't liked and subscribed, which means maybe it shows up in your algorithm, maybe it doesn't. So don't leave that to chance. Just go ahead and hit that button, and we'd sure appreciate that. And that way we can keep doing what we're doing, and you're not left to the whims of some algorithm. Thanks.